Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. I had planned on addressing today the moral conundrum of whether Israel had a responsibility to withhold aid to the Palestinians until all of our hostages were released, or if Israel has a moral responsibility to give aid to the Palestinians because the suffering of others doesn't trump the suffering of our own. But sadly, events on Wednesday night just jolted those plans. And to be honest with all of you, I haven't quite landed, settled, or baked my exact response and feelings to the horrific and inexplicable murder of these two young, beautiful souls that were taken from their family, taken from their friends, their community, and our world senselessly. So I hope you indulge me to share a few streaming thoughts in my head. After the Tree of Life shooting in Pittsburgh, which happened on a Saturday, the following Friday night, I came to our services. And services on Friday are very different than our services on Saturday. They're normally between 25 and 40 people there. It's very relaxed. I often wear slacks and a shirt and not much more. And I go around and proverbially slap backs and kiss babies and run for office and wish everyone well. And there were a couple there I'd never seen before. And I usually go up to people who I don't know, and I said, Shabbat Shalom, welcome, it's good to have you. And they immediately stood up and got very close to my face, and they said, we are the O'Malleys. We live right over here in the town nearby. We're not Jewish, but we needed to be here tonight. And I hugged them, and I cried. And it was my first cry after Pittsburgh. And to be honest with you, I thought after October 7th, 2023, that the O'Malleys, both the literal O'Malleys and other O'Malleys, were going to be at synagogue the following Saturday night. And they weren't. In fact, we were there. People who even weren't part of our community, but were Jewish, they all came out on that Friday night and Saturday. But the O'Malleys weren't. And there were crickets from the Jewish allies, the supporters in our world. And then this event happened, and it was like a reliving of the O'Malleys. Not that they came, but emails that Dory and I received over the past few days were very similar to that after Pittsburgh. People saying, we love you. People who aren't Jewish. People who are part of our social orbit, perhaps from college or earlier friendships, some in the community, some are not. It was Reverend Al Sharpton who held a press conference this week condemning the murders and standing with the New York Board of Rabbis and its leader, Joe Potasnik. It was just like that feeling. What was it that caused that? That didn't make it happen in October? Was it Americans who were killed? Was it the fact that they were killed because they were Jewish, which was clearly the case in both? Why was it that we had the empathy of a community when our people are senselessly gunned down, but not when our nation is raped and murdered for sleeping in their bed, similar to the echoes of the Holocaust? When I asked this question to Bret Stephens from the New York Times, he gave me a brilliant answer, because I had wrestled for a long time with why we had the empathy of the O'Malleys. And again, I'm speaking proverbially, not figuratively, not literally. Why did we have the O'Malley support after Tree of Life, but crickets, just total silence after October 7th? And Bret Stephens said to me, because we know how to galvanize in the backdrop of white nationalism. When the KKK, which is in essence the group, not literally again, but those who hate Jews and those who might hate blacks, Asian Americans and others, when they come against us, we know how to stand in support and to say that's not going to happen on our watch. But when it's a war in Israel, we can't divide that way. So my question to Brett Stevens today would be, well, what makes this one different? Because the factors that led to the death of these two young people in Washington, D.C., I should really say the murder, not the death, were almost identical to the factors that led to Tree of Life, but radically different places on the spectrum. And it is what I'm going to talk about in a minute, what Deborah Lipstadt refers to as the horseshoe theory. You see, Tree of Life was about someone who was afraid that immigrants were going to take over our country, that the Jews were going to have total control because there was going to be highest Shabbat, where we welcomed immigrants in front of us. And he said, I can no longer take this, and took his AR-15 and went into the Tree of Life and killed all those innocent people who had come to pray, most of them senior citizens. God bless you. And that represented this far-right extreme that wasn't so new for Jews in America. But what happened on Wednesday that we know so far is that these two young people were targeted. We don't know this yet, but our belief is not because they were particular embassy workers. This was an event for young people, and they happened to be young people in the community. They were attending an event for the AJC, the American Jewish Committee. It wasn't in the embassy or for the embassy, and they wore no embassy paraphernalia on them. And they left, and this person representing the far left extreme, not the far right, the far left, shot them for Gaza, and as he said in the chant that has echoed on college campuses now for 2 years, free, free Palestine, as he was being handcuffed. If someone could please explain to me how murdering two young, innocent people is going to help in the process of freeing Palestine, I would love to be educated, because I have no clue. And the craziest thing of all of this to me is, from everything I've learned about these two young people, besides how beautiful they were and sweet, and the fact that Yaron wasn't even a practicing Jew. He was a Christian, Israeli Christian. His father was Israeli, his mother wasn't Jewish, was raised in Judaism, planning to propose to his girlfriend in Israel this week. That this person who committed these heinous crimes, allegedly Elias Rodriguez, that he would fit into the same social demographics as these two young people in 10 other arenas. Because they were climate change activists. They believed that climate change was a serious threat. They were socially aware for other groups that wanted to bring peace and harmony to the world. They were considered by others in their spectrum to be left and liberal, but unabashedly Zionist. And probably if we had the blessing of asking them, they would say, I'm a Zionist because I'm a liberal. Because Israel's the only place where these liberal values could live and exist in the entire Middle East. And yet, because of lies, literal lies, nothing fancy, nothing sophisticated, just lies that have carried on like a virus that has been more viral than COVID ever was. Two people are gunned down, and their lives are stripped away. Deborah Lipstadt explains that there is no longer a spectrum of left and right. She says we live in a horseshoe. And if all of you can imagine a horseshoe in your mind, the bottom of the horseshoe swings all the way around again, and the other bottom of the horseshoe is very close to one another. And what she explained is that the radical left and the radical right are more alike than any of us think, because their ultimate desires when it comes to the Jews are identical. Deborah was actually asked during her Senate confirmation hearing, what is a more imminent threat to America and to Jews, the radical left or the radical right? And she answered that in a very graceful and diplomatic way. But she later wrote that she said, I really wanted to invoke the response of the great Yiddish writer Shalom Aleichem, who said, would I either die of listeria or cholera? Meaning, who really cares when you're the Jew? What is more of a danger? They're both equally dangerous. And who cares if we're worried about living in shul and a crazed gunman from the far right would come in? Or if we're worried about our kids going to an event in New York or Washington or Chicago and walking out just because they are Jews and being gunned down? Does it really matter? Does it make any difference? What we have seemed to do in this society, in this climate, is unfathomable. It is nonsensical that we have created a space for some where they can say things that are outrageous, outlandish, and untrue that cannot be said about any other group in America. Not any other group. And they are not only accepted, they are supported, they are celebrated. And the world is standing by quietly. In the places that are supposed to teach leadership, morality, and most importantly, education to decode the difference between facts and fiction. Fiction is being spewed about like oxygen and imbibed by everyone in the air, and no one is standing forward and correcting it. No one. It's tantamount to people standing on campus and saying 2 + 2 = 7. This is our math program, everyone. And then we continue to covet these so-called Ivy League educations. It doesn't make sense. And I can't make sense of the nonsensical to all of you. I can't make sense of it to myself. All I can say is that the ingredients that led to the killing at the Tree of Life are identical to the ingredients of the murder of these two outside the Jewish Museum in Washington. Radical right, radical left, it's exactly the same. And they're just all an existential danger. And I wish I had some elixir that we could all drink, some potion that would make it all make sense and some answer to us. I don't. I have one piece of advice, one piece. I believe that the greatest advocates for civil rights in America were not only black people speaking out, but they were white people speaking out for black people. When they saw that civil right of a black person being stripped away, and they felt it was unfair, that the power of the white person speaking up for the black person had more potency. I think that when gay people in America were discriminated against, what made more of a difference, what moved the needle significantly, was not other gay people advocating, but straight people who were advocating for LGBTQ plus people. Because it said, we are against this right. And perhaps what we need, and I argue we're very good at when it's us or it's not us, and we're so darn thirsty for, are for other people who aren't Jewish, like the O'Malleys, to come forward and to stand with us not only in solidarity and in mourning, but to call out fiction and replace it with facts. To call out those untruths and lies and to demand that we live in a world that is honest. Yes, we can and we should have vigorous debate on things that are debatable. But whether or not the sky is blue and the earth is round is not debatable. Whether or not Israel has the right to defend itself against Hamas, a group that is sworn to its destruction, is not debatable. Whether or not Israel has the right to demand and to seek to repatriate those people that were stolen from sovereign Israeli land and being held hostage for 600 days in tunnels and deprived of all human rights, that's not debatable. It's not. And to demand that it is, or that we have some occupation in lands like Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or Netanya, is not only not true, it's not debatable. And we need people like Yaron who aren't necessarily Jewish, but are proud and smart, who can testify to the rights and the truths that we know and that we need. Because we can't use our voice alone. The second thing I think we need is that if I ask people on the radical right about the fears of the radical right's pointing their guns, literally and figuratively, at the Jews, they will say, I'm not worried about that. If I were to put a political picture on this just to help you a little better, and I'm sorry for politicizing this, the people on the far right will say, I'm not worried about the craziness of the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and the Lauren Boeberts and the space lasers. Those people, they're outliers. They're nuts. We don't pay attention to them. What keeps me up at night is Ilhan Omar. What keeps me up at night is Rashida Tlaib. That's what keeps me up at night. Those are the people that are taking away the existential threat. Those are the people that you should be fearful of. And when I talk to people on the far left, they say the exact inverse. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar represent 2 out of 435 elected members of Congress. They are outliers. They're not to be worried about. What I worry about is the fear of Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene. In other words, the far right is worried about the far left, and the far left is worried about the far right, but there's no one on the right or the left who's willing to say to them, hold on. We need to call these people out and find something that's a little bit more centered and realistic. Because just like straight people advocate for gay people and white people advocate for black people, the far right is not going to listen to the demands of the far left, and the far left's not going to listen to the demands of the far right. It has to be people in their own camps that say to them, you want to make a protest and demand that aid come into Gaza? That's debatable. That's open to debate. But there is no place for violence. There is no place for hatred. There is no place for prejudice. There is no place for xenophobia. That's what has to happen. I don't know Elias Rodriguez. Never heard of him before Thursday morning. But I don't think he came up with this idea of killing these 2 in a box by himself, not talking to anybody else for the last few months. This is a result of living in a dangerous echo chamber and being oxygenated off of other hate. And it's up to all of us to use our voices in this way. I wish I had more cogent thoughts. I wish I had more baked ideas and direction for all of us to unpack. But like all of you, I'm still in that period of mourning, that aninut. When we hear about death but haven't buried someone in Judaism, we've heard about this tragedy, but we can't make sense of it yet. We can't process it yet. It's unfathomable. 2 people not far away in age from my own children. And for you, for some of your own children. Could you be more proud to know that your kids are going to a young leadership event at AJC if they live in D.C.? My nephew was supposed to be at that event. Thankfully, he had a sore throat that night. Could you imagine the pride you have knowing your kids are going to that, but then having that pride squashed so that they don't go to such events because we've now instilled such a level of fear? I wish I or any of us could make sense of the darkness and strangeness of the world in which we're living. And until we can, I hope that we can channel our prayers and our thoughts and our love and support to the families of the Milgrams and the Lashinskys, to let them know that the death of their children will not be in vain, and that we are committed to not only memorializing them, but to keeping the very spirit of how they lived and why they lived strong forever. May they forever rest in peace, and may we find the resolve to keep their memory strong. Shabbat shalom, everyone.